So another bank in the US has collapsed, and this time around everything seems to have been patched over really quickly, and this is the First Republic Bank, and you guys wanted me to talk about this in a video, so today we're going to be talking about this exact topic and everything, of course, relating it to tech and how it all ties in with the ongoing dilemma of manufacturers like the RTX 4070 releasing GPUs, and then there's price cuts that are so early in the cycle, and then Nvidia sort of fires back with cutting production. All these things, we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the video. Let's get on with the main situation first, and that is that this bank went out of business for the main reason of it taking on too aggressive loans when interest rates were too low. In other words, they loaned out a lot of fixed mortgage rates, especially the 30 years, and this creates an asset on the bank's balance sheet that's otherwise known as a mortgage-backed security. And what happens to these mortgage-backed securities is, in this environment where the interest rates are going up, this makes the value of these loans go significantly down, since they're at a fixed rate mortgage and the interest rates on the market at the time is much higher than what they loan these loans out for. So in other words, the bank is losing money on their balance sheet tremendously with the value of all these loans that they loaned out. Now, couple this in with two other US banks that had massive deposit runs, the main one being Silicon Valley Bank earlier in the year. Customers at this bank were getting very nervous about their deposits, especially those with money over $250,000. So there was a massive outflow of deposits on this bank, and so then that in turn caused this bank, the First Republic Bank, to go into the negative territory, essentially being bankrupt on their balance sheet. And then the FDIC has come in, taken over this bank, and then sold it to the highest bidder, which in this case so happens to be JP Morgan. Now, the thing about this is they're bending the rules for JP Morgan. They're now the biggest bank in America in terms of their deposits, having over the rule of not exceeding 10% of all deposits in America. So basically, there's now been an exception granted to JP Morgan to the rules of having the biggest amount of deposits in the country. And this is very concerning going forward, because a lot of people are worried about the banks, the big banks, taking over all the smaller banks, and then essentially having very little competition in the market, where they can not only raise fees and lower the savings rates on deposits, but they can also in turn have more control, in that if someone does something that the bank or even governments don't agree with, they can then cancel that person's account and effectively make them no longer able to bank in the banking system. So it does concern me a lot what has already happened, but I feel what is going to happen is even of more concern when we look at, I feel this is only the first of many bank failures to come, where if we go back to the Great Depression, there was hundreds of bank failures. But the second point of contention, and this is actually my biggest concern with this whole ordeal, is where I read a certain text along the lines of the taxpayer won't be paying for this. And I believe that is false, where the FDIC says they'll just raise the fees that go and get passed on to banks, which the fees then get passed on to the end user, the average taxpayer anyway, or they just print the money up with the Federal Reserve and hand it out to the banks, and the public pays through this via a thing called inflation. So either way, the taxpayer does get screwed when there is intermediation via the larger banks, JP Morgan, especially when we read deeper into the articles where the FDIC says that they will assume some of the losses and protect JP Morgan now that they've acquired First Republic Bank from any further losses. However, going forward, let's take a look at the average person with the tech deals and what can we expect going forward right after this sponsor spot.
Never pay full price for Windows 10 or 11 again. With today's video sponsor, SCD Keys, you can get activated for as little as $15 using that coupon BFTYC. Links in the description below.
So the golden age of PC gaming is upon us, unfortunately. I do say unfortunately, where this time around, I believe it's in a set of circumstances that have been thrusted upon the individual that make it so that cheaper prices of PC parts may not seem so good when we've got the rising costs of living, electricity prices, food costs, all those things are going up in price. And so this is directly correlated to the prices of PC parts going down, since they are an extended luxury and you don't have to have a new graphics card in order to survive. And so relating this back now to PC prices going forward, what I've seen, and I've actually just finished my PC parts hunt of the month here at Tech City, the used PC parts hunt, and I'm seeing that the prices and the deals that are coming up are getting better and better on the used market. Now, when we look at the new market, there's also a lot of really good sales happening depending on what product you're looking at. For instance, in Japan here, I'm picking up Gen 4 2 terabyte NVMe SSDs for around $70, which I've never seen SSDs this cheap for in Japan. But not only that, I've never seen SSDs cheap in the rest of the world for Gen 4 SSDs of this caliber. So it does raise an alarm bell that a lot of these prices are crashing very quickly because a lot of these companies that sell the said parts have loans, and those loans need to be repaid, especially if they're coming up to their new loan agreements and they can't refinance because the banks are tightening their standards. Now, when we look at the banks themselves, if we go to the Federal Reserve's Beige book report, they say within this information itself that lending standards have tightened and the loan velocity does continue to fall in the broad segment, meaning that there's less money being created and there's less pressure on the M2 money supply to go upwards, meaning that it's going downwards. Now, as this M2 money supply goes down, all things equal, prices of tech products will go down. However, one thing that we have to be concerned about here, very concerned about in my opinion, is that there is a cost to produce all these products. And at a certain level of price, certain companies will no longer be able to produce these products. They'll just simply go out of business and stop making the products. So that is my biggest concern with tech prices in general. Yes, a lot of the prices are very good on some of the products right now. I'll give you an example of some of the deals just before making this video that I pulled up that I thought were exceptional value for money. For instance, an i9 10850K was going for under $300. And if you're looking at AliExpress worldwide, you pick this thing up for $270. I actually ordered one to make a mini ITX build with 10 cores on the last of the ring bus architecture. But then if we look at graphics cards, we've got the AMD cards in particular, the RX 6700 XTs, the 6900 XTs. Those cards are absolutely bargain prices on new. But then if we go over to the used market, there's also a lot of deals going on there too, where if I look at different graphics cards for sale, they're going down in prices compared to last month. And then if we look on the DDR4 prices on memory, I'm seeing 32 gigabyte RAM kits now, 3600 megahertz, available for around $60. So extremely good deals to be had right now. But back to that point of concern, as we go forward, a lot of these companies, if the price isn't right for them to produce it, they will simply stop making the products because there's not enough money going around for people to afford these products at given price points. So that is a big area of concern for me going forward in relation to the money supply dropping, but also the prices of inflation remaining high and the business loans and the amount of corporate debt. So when it comes to some of these tech products, they simply don't have a whole lot of room to go down anymore. And this is where I think it gets more interesting because some of these companies will go out of business and then the banks will then want to keep those assets flowing and keep cash flow as up to par as much as possible. And so they will then lease out those or even sell those to other corporations that aren't so indebted. So you will have the free market, if you allow it to function properly, will come in and try to fix it with competitive prices and keep the competition going. Though do keep in mind, it gets to a point where it's no longer profitable to produce these parts. And so it balances itself out and the prices stay through supply and demand just above that price, even in tight economic conditions. Now, what about that shiny new RTX 4070 from NVIDIA? Now, a lot of you guys want to see it come down to $400 or even cheaper. And the bad news here is that I don't think it's going to come down to $400, but I think it may come down to, say, around $500 USD, depending on the conditions. Though do keep in mind, one thing about NVIDIA is they are a publicly listed company. Profit is a big forefront on their priorities in terms of making as much as possible for their shareholders. So they're going to try and find a balance. And according to rumors, it does look like they will find a balance by restricting supply on production just to keep, as we said in previous videos, to keep the allocative efficiency going. But I do believe companies like Nvidia and AMD and Intel can ramp up the allocative efficiency to help out the customers that are feeling the pinch from inflation in other areas and make it so that they can be more competitive in these times. Anyhow, guys, going forward, you're probably thinking, Brian, what are you doing personally? You keep warning us about all these possibilities that can occur in the land of finance and how this relates to tech products. Going forward, I believe tech products, as long as that M2 money supply is going down, I do believe tech prices are going to either remain the cheapest they're going to be or they'll come down even more. I just personally do not know, as a YouTuber, the profit margins on a lot of these products. I do know it is very tight, however, in the land of SSDs, DDR4 memory, and also PC cases, for example, ATX cases. I do know margins are very tight in these fields from reports I've heard from insiders. However, when it comes to graphics cards, I constantly hear so many different figures thrown around there. It's very hard for me to give you an accurate figure because the people at Nvidia and AMD and Intel will never tell me those figures, and they'll be strictly breaking their NDAs if they did. But if you guys do have figures on graphics cards and how much it costs to produce them and get them to retail versus the profit being made, I would love to know that information in the comments. I feel a lot of people would like to know that information too. But as it stands, I feel going forward, those prices will remain quite low. I feel like in the last few months they've remained low, especially on the new market, but that's definitely already putting pressure on the used market now. And what I've seen personally is that the used market is now coming down in price, and there's actually never been a better time to buy a PC or build a PC that's a mix of used and new parts, either both all new parts or both used parts. I just feel it's a great time right now, believe it or not, to build a PC because the prices, at least inflation adjusted, are some of the cheapest they've ever been, if you're not looking at a brand new RTX 4070. And with all that out of the way, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, then be sure to hit that like button. Also, let us know in the comments section below what you guys think of the information presented in today's video. Are you seeing prices drop in your area in general for enthusiast tech PC products? Love reading your thoughts and opinions. I know from experience here in Japan and also in Australia, prices have been coming down quite aggressively, especially on everything, I think, but GPUs. I think GPUs still remain quite elevated in prices, though what I'm finding personally is things like GTX 1080s and older cards are actually coming down quite a fair bit in prices. They love reading your thoughts and opinions, as always, just like this question of the day here, which comes from Sniffles8655, and they ask, which would be a better CPU for the X58? An i7 970 or an Xeon X5675. If anyone could help me, I would so appreciate it. So the X5675 is, I think, the best CPU for that architecture, the X58 in general, period. So I would get that if you can, providing your motherboard supports it. You can check on just quickly going for a Google search, checking your motherboard and seeing if it supports it. There should be some benchmarks out there that confirm that. If not, you may want to dig a little bit deeper. But that CPU, in my opinion, was the best binned 6-core 12-threaded Xeon for the X58 architecture. So I'd go with that over the i7 970. Hope that answers that question. If you guys have stayed this far and you're enjoying that Tech Yes content, then be sure to hit that like button and ring that bell. And I'll catch you guys in another tech video very soon. Peace out for now. Bye.